Manipulative ways, Sonia. You knew about this and you didn't tell me.
James, please, it's complicated. I can explain everything.
Sonia had always kept a careful balance between her demanding career and her loving relationship with her husband, James. Working as an executive assistant to the elusive Mr. Calloway, the CEO of a prestigious firm, Sonia was no stranger to pressure. Mr. Calloway, known for his magnetic charm and cutthroat business tactics, demanded more from her than most employees could handle. But Sonia, always eager to excel, never hesitated to put in the extra work. Yet, there was something about him, something unsettling that she hadn't fully shared with James. She kept the darker aspect of her job hidden, convinced that it was just part of the corporate grind. However, when James accidentally uncovered the truth about Mr. Calloway's manipulative ways, everything changed. The weight of a secret had finally been exposed, and now Sonia had to confront not only her boss's actions, but the strain it would place on her marriage. One quiet evening, Sonia sat in the living room, mindlessly scrolling through her phone, while James worked late in his study. The phone call that came in disrupted the usual rhythm of their night. It was Mr. Calloway, her boss, calling unexpectedly. Sonia, trying to maintain composure, answered the call with a forced smile. The conversation was tense, her boss demanding urgent tasks, adjusting deadlines, and making unreasonable requests as usual. However, in the heat of the moment, Sonia's frustration slipped through. She vented, unknowingly revealing details she had carefully kept hidden from James. She spoke about Mr. Calloway's controlling behavior, his inappropriate remarks, and the mounting pressure he placed on her. She hung up, unaware that James had been in the next room, overhearing the entire conversation. He walked into the living room, his expression unreadable. "Is everything all right with your boss?" he asked quietly, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Sonia froze, her heart skipping a beat as she realized what had just happened. James, who had always trusted her, was visibly shaken by what he had overheard. He didn't understand why she hadn't told him sooner about the manipulative behavior or the emotional toll it was taking on her. For a moment, Sonia felt a tight knot in her stomach as she realized how much her husband cared, yet how much she concealed. I didn't want to burden you," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. James's face hardened, a mixture of concern and anger flashing across his features. "You don't have to carry this alone. Sonia, you should have told me. We'll fix this together." But Sonia knew things had already spiraled out of control. The weight of James's disappointment lingered long after conversation had ended. Sonia lay awake that night, replaying the events in her mind, guilt gnawing at her. She had always prided herself on being able to manage her professional life without dragging her personal life into it. But now everything felt intertwined. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had betrayed James's trust by keeping Mr. Calloway's behavior a secret for so long. The next morning, Sonia made a decision. She would fix things both for herself and for her marriage. She would put some distance between herself and Mr. Calloway, even if it meant confronting the uncomfortable truth. She started by avoiding his calls and emails, hoping that by stepping back, she could regain control over her job and her life. But Mr. Calloway didn't make it easy. His demands only grew more urgent, and Sonia's guilt weighed heavily on her. She found herself torn between her desire to keep James from worrying and the overwhelming pressure from her boss. Every phone call felt like a battle. Mr. Calloway would insist she meet with him urgently, claiming the fate of major deals rested in her hands. Yet, each time Sonia agreed, a piece of her felt like she was losing herself a little more. She had become trapped in this toxic cycle, afraid to stand up to the man who controlled her career. At night, she would try to explain to James what was going on, but she couldn't bring herself to admit how deep the situation had gone. "I'll talk to him tomorrow," she would say, hoping her vague assurances would be enough. But every time, the conversations grew more strained, more uncertain. James could see through her attempts to reassure him. He knew something wasn't right, but he respected Sonia's need to handle it in her own way. Despite her best efforts, the situation wasn't getting better. In fact, it was becoming worse. Her attempts to avoid Mr. Calloway only seemed to intensify his demands, and the stress from both her job and her strained relationship with James began to take its toll. Sonia felt herself at a crossroads. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. The burden of the secret was becoming too much to bear. One night, after another tense conversation with Mr. Calloway, Sania realized the only way out was to confront him directly and finally tell James the whole truth. Sania knew she could no longer hide from the truth. The pressure had reached its breaking point, and both her professional and personal lives were unraveling. That evening, as the weight of her decision settled in, she sat down with James. Her voice trembled as she finally confessed everything: the emotional manipulation, the inappropriate comments, the power Mr. Calloway wielded over her, and how deeply she had struggled to keep it all under wraps. James listened in stunned silence, his face a mixture of disbelief and anger. He had known something was wrong, but hearing the full extent of what Sania had been dealing with hit him harder than he expected. As Sania finished her story, James's expression softened, but his determination was clear. "This ends now," he said, his voice firm. "We can't let him continue treating you this way." Before Sania could protest, James had already taken matters into his own hands. Without consulting her, he reached out to Mr. Calloway under the guise of discussing business matters. The plan was simple: arrange a meeting, confront the man about his behavior, and demand that he stop manipulating Sania. The meeting took place the following afternoon. James, calm yet resolute, entered Mr. Calloway's office. Sania's stomach churned as she imagined the scene unfolding. She hadn't expected James to take such a bold step, and now she feared the consequences. Would her job be on the line? Would Mr. Calloway retaliate? She had no idea what would happen next. The confrontation was tense. Mr. Calloway, at first, tried to play it off, denying any wrongdoing, but James wasn't backing down. He listed the unethical practices, the manipulation, and the pressure Mr. Calloway had put Sania under, making it clear that his behavior was unacceptable. The tension in the room was palpable as Mr. Calloway's demeanor shifted from calm to defensive, then hostile. He threatened James, claiming that any attempt to expose him would lead to legal consequences, but James stood his ground. By the end of the meeting, Mr. Calloway's facade of invincibility had cracked. He was rattled, but it was clear that James wasn't done. This was just the beginning. The consequences for everyone involved were yet to unfold. When Sania found out that James had taken matters into his own hands, she was furious. The betrayal stung, even though she knew he had done it out of love and concern. James had crossed a line. He hadn't consulted her before confronting her boss. For all of Sania's guilt and frustration, she still hadn't been ready to face the consequences of such a bold move. Her job, her career, and everything she had worked for now hung in the balance. That evening, as Sania returned home, James sat quietly on the couch, waiting for her. His face was unreadable, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Sania's anger simmered beneath the surface, but she couldn't bring herself to yell. Instead, she asked the one question that had been haunting her all day. "What have you done?" James met her gaze without flinching. "I did what I had to do. I couldn't just stand by and watch you suffer. Sania, you've been hiding this for far too long." Sania's heart ached. She knew James was right, but the idea of him taking matters into his own hands felt like an invasion of her personal space, something that only she should have controlled. "But you don't understand the consequences," she whispered, pacing the room. "Mr. Calloway could retaliate. I could lose my job. Everything will change, and not in a good way." James's voice softened, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry. I thought I was helping. But I understand if you're angry. Let's figure this out together." The tension in the room was palpable, but Sania knew that, for better or worse, their lives had changed forever. She had to face the fallout both from her boss and from her own marriage. Nothing would ever be the same again. But as she looked at James, she realized that their love might be the one thing that could help them through the storm. The following days were a blur of uncertainty and tension, but Sania knew she couldn't go back to the way things were. She gathered the courage to report Mr. Calloway to HR, fully aware that it would come with risks, but also a sense of liberation. She outlined his unethical behavior, the emotional manipulation, and the inappropriate demands. It was time for the company to know the truth. To her surprise, HR took immediate action. They launched an investigation, and within a week, Mr. Calloway was placed on administrative leave while the company reviewed his conduct. The news rocked the office, but Sania felt a strange sense of relief. Her career was no longer overshadowed by fear or intimidation. In the meantime, the company offered Sania a new role in a different department, one where she could grow without the looming presence of her former boss. It wasn't promotion she had envisioned, but it was a chance for a fresh start. As for her marriage, the strain began to ease. Sania and James had deep, honest conversations about boundaries, trust, and how to support each other in difficult situations. They were stronger for having faced this challenge together. The ordeal wasn't over, but Sania finally felt empowered, both in her career and in her relationship, knowing she could stand up for herself and for what was right. In the end, Sania learned that no secret is worth sacrificing her peace of mind or her relationships. By confronting the truth and standing up to Mr. Calloway, she not only reclaimed her professional integrity, but also reinforced the trust in her marriage. James, too, learned the importance of supporting Sania without overstepping, understanding that sometimes the best way to help is to listen and stand by her side. Together, they emerged stronger, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a team united in love, trust, and mutual respect.